Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell with news and views from the Nefarium on Thursday, March 9th, 2017. And the fallout from Brexit continues. And I do mean fallout quite literally. A very, very important article I want you to read that I'm linking from the New York Times. I normally don't like to read the New York Times for reasons that most of you can probably guess, not the least of which being it's owned by a Mexican drug lord, but we won't go there. This is an important article. It was picked up actually by the Times, apparently, having first run on Reuters. It's an article by a French author, Jean-Paul Pellissier, and it was dated on Reuters March 6th. So this is a fairly recent article. The title of the article is Fearing U.S. Withdrawal, Europe Considers Its Own Nuclear Deterrent. And I want to read quite a few sections of this article for you and then bring to your attention another article and some commentary. And the dateline here is Berlin. This was apparently run in a German newspaper or magazine called The Interpreter. Actual article is by Max Fischer. Quote, an idea once unthinkable is gaining attention in Europe, a European Union nuclear weapons program. Under such a plan, France's arsenal would be repurposed to protect the rest of Europe and would be put under a common European command, funding plan, defense doctrine, or some combination of the three. Now note that, French nukes, joint command, European-wide financing. It would be enacted if the continent could no longer count on American protection. Though no new countries would join the nuclear club under this scheme, it would amount to an unprecedented escalation in Europe's collective military power and a drastic break with American leadership. Analysts say that the talk, even if it never translates into action, demonstrates the growing sense in Europe that drastic steps may be necessary to protect the post-war order in the era of the Trump presidency, a resurgent Russia, and the possibility of an alignment between the two. Even proponents who remain a minority, acknowledge enormous hurdles, but discussion of a so-called Euro deterrent has entered the mainstream, particularly in Germany, a country that would be central to any plan, but where anti-nuclear sentiment is widespread. Now, I'm skipping here a couple of paragraphs. Jaroslaw Kaczynski, Poland's former prime minister and now the head of its ruling party, provided the highest level call for a European Union nuclear program in a February interview in a German newspaper. But the most important support has come from Roderick Kiesewetter, a lawmaker and foreign policy spokesman with Germany's ruling party. That would be the Christian Democrats of Frau Merkel, who gave the nuclear option increased credibility by raising it shortly after President Trump's election. Now, I'm skipping here again a few paragraphs. This would require, he said, 4 ingredients. A French pledge to commit its weapons to a common European defense. German financing to demonstrate the program's collective nature. A joint command, and a plan to place French warheads in other European countries. The number of warheads in Europe would not increase under this plan and could not decrease if the United States withdraws. Now, stop and note those 4 elements. An increase of the number of French warheads financed by Germany. Okay, now, I don't know if that raises your eyebrows, or if any of you are French out there, your eyebrows, but let me continue with the article. I'm skipping again several paragraphs. In practical terms, The plan would change the flag on Europe's nuclear deterrent from that of the United States to that of France. But this would risk making an American exit from Europe more permanent. Skipping again now, several paragraphs in this article. Some observers believe that the official shows of support are intended only to pressure Mr. Trump into maintaining the status quo, while Mr. Kiesewetter emphasized it is his preferred outcome. But Mr. Narang, this is another individual mentioned in the article, and I want you to pay attention now. I'm mentioning him not so much because of what it says about him, but simply because this is lead in to another very important point. But Mr. Narang said that, pardon me, regardless of the intentions, there is a blurry line between signaling and actually pursuing a fallback nuclear option. Nuclear scholars call this insurance hedging, in which a protectee comes to doubt its protector and responds by taking steps toward, but not actually completing, its own nuclear program. This is meant to goad the protector into staying and to prepare in case it doesn't. Japan, for instance, has quietly developed latent capabilities that are sometimes figuratively described as a screwdriver's turn away from a bomb. And that, incidentally, is what I've always thought, not only about the Japanese nuclear program, but quite frankly about the German one as well. But definitely in Japan's case, this turn away from a functioning bomb has always been there. So it is, in a certain sense, kind of a de facto nuclear power. North Korea, incidentally, knows this. All right, continuing. Mr. Narang said that he was reeling from the seriousness of the discussion, the first, listen carefully, the first since a failed and now forgotten effort in the 1950s for a French-German-Italian nuclear cooperation. Now, that's what I want to read from the end of the article, but folks, this, I'm sure that you find this as disturbing as I find this, but I want to tell you that I suspect that this is more about the EU than it is about NATO, and that it is about Mr. Trump. Because as the article points out, many, many years ago in the 1950s, beginning in the 1950s actually, but continuing all through that period of the Cold War, from the 50s, the 60s, all the way up into the early 1970s, there was talk about just such a joint European nuclear deterrent involving the three major continental powers, Germany, France, and Italy, pooling their resources to create this nuclear deterrent. As it turned out, Charles de Gaulle removed France from NATO, all right, and began to build the Force de Frappe, which was the French nuclear deterrent, an independent nuclear deterrent, for very similar reasons, incidentally, that Churchill began immediately after World War II, began the independent British nuclear deterrent. In other words, it was as much about mistrust of the United States as it was about deterrence of the Soviet Union. Now, the problem here, folks, with any discussion of making France the nuclear deterrent guarantor of European security, with German money financing more warheads, is this. That's the latest issue of The Economist. I just got it a couple days ago. And as you can guess, the real problem here isn't the United States, it's Marine Le Pen, all right? And the possibility that France might leave the EU if indeed she gets elected to become president of France. Now, I've been saying for quite some time, regardless of what the outcome is with Miss Le Pen, I think you're going to see, if she goes down to defeat, you're going to see the backlash against the Brussels immigration policies, the Berlin-Brussels immigration policies, continue to rise in France. Inevitably, in other words, I am predicting a triumph of the populist, centrist, or right nationalist parties in France. And that means ultimately you're going to see a crack up of the European Union. This is the problem. And if there's a crack up of the European Union along with Brexit, you can be very, very certain that neither Westminster or the Elysee in Paris are going to turn control of their independent nuclear deterrence over to any sort of common or joint defense council. All right. These plans have been around since the 1950s, and they've never gone anywhere for one principal reason, and that is, number one, the opposition to the nuclear weapon option at a popular level within Germany, and then on the other hand, within France and Great Britain, the opposition to Germany having nuclear weapons. Now, I mentioned this Economist magazine, this issue of March 4th, March 10th. There is on page 40, and I'll show it to you, an article called Eine deutsche Atombombe, a German atom bomb. And the interesting thing about this article is that it mentions many of the same names that I just read you in the New York Times article. So in other words, what the Economist is telling you, if you put it together with the New York Times article, is the fallback position from the creation of a common nuclear deterrent for the European Union based on the French nuclear deterrent, the force de frappe. If that happens, the fallback position is a German nuclear deterrent. All right. Now, what do I suspect this is really all about? Folks, I do not suspect that this is about NATO or that this is about even providing a common nuclear deterrent for Europe. I really suspect that this is a way that they are gambling behind the scenes, although the public story is reaction to Trump. This is, in my estimation, really a way for them to try to use any method to keep the European Union together. And stop and think about this. If you allow a European Union dominated by Germany, who is going to have ultimately the control of those nuclear weapons, and what would they be used for? My suspicion is that the globalist Eurocrats that have been behind this project from the very get-go would use those nuclear weapons not simply as a deterrent, but as a means of forcing people not to leave. All right. And this is interesting because where is most of the opposition now to the European Union focused and concentrated? Well, right now it's in France, Europe's only other nuclear power. So I think that this is as much about the EU as it is about NATO, and this is a desperation attempt to keep it together. Now, what's my prediction? If Marine Le Pen gets into the Elysee in this year's French elections, and even if she doesn't, as I said, eventually you're going to see this backlash occur, all right? But I strongly suspect that Ms. Le Pen is going to have a rather interesting showing in the French elections. If France leaves the EU, then this means ultimately that a nuclear deterrent is going to be pursued by Germany. And as I've indicated before, Germany is like Japan. It's that screwdriver away from actually having functioning nuclear, and I would add thermonuclear weapons. And please understand, what upsets me about many of these articles about nuclear deterrence is that in France or Britain's case, we are not talking about nuclear powers, we are talking about thermonuclear powers. And the same would be true in Germany's case. If Germany pursued nuclear weapons, they would not stop with the atom bomb. It would be strategic thermonuclear weapons, which they can easily build right now if they had a mind to. So this is a very, very interesting story, folks. Keep a watch on it in conjunction not only with what's happening in Europe with Marine Le Pen, but ultimately down the line, because as this article that I just commented about also tells you, Germany is being pressured by the Eastern European nations, Poland and the Baltic states, to pursue this nuclear option idea. In other words, they are looking to Germany if the European Union falls apart. So this is very, very interesting news, folks. I want to make a quick announcement. We do have a European African time zone members vid chat tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock. I have kept all the questions that people sent me for the vid chat that I had to cancel when I was sick 2 weeks ago. So that vid chat will be taking place tomorrow. I was rather sick, and I want to thank you all for putting up with that absence of the vid chat. I'm planning at some point this summer, hopefully, to have a makeup chat. I can't in the next 2 months because I'm just incredibly busy. But anyway, that's it for today's news and views, everybody. I'll see you on the flip side. Bye-bye, and God bless.